So, welcome back to HopePod. Here we are, back in the room. Another week, another topic and another guest, but we'll get onto that in a second. Let's not jump ahead of the gun. This is HopePod. We are relentlessly hopeful about the future of the church in this weird and changing time as we're coming out of a pandemic. We're getting different guests on each week. We are talking about experiences and telling stories and just exploring together what we think the future of the church is. But the caveat is we are no experts. And if you've watched the previous episodes, you probably know that already. But we don't have all the answers, but what we love is just discussing and getting an idea of what could be on the horizon. But if you want to join the conversation, we would love you to. If you're watching on YouTube, you can comment in the comment section below. Or if you're listening or want to send us an email, you can send us an email at hopepodlanks@gmail.com. I think I got that right without looking. I got it right. So today we are joined obviously by Claire and Damian. Give them a wave. There we go.
Hi.
Say hello. And we are also joined by the Revd Craig Abbott.
Hello.
Hello. Craig, do you want to introduce yourself? Just tell us who you are.
Thank you. I'm Craig Abbott. I'm the vicar of a little church just south of Lancaster called St John's Church in Ellel. And I've been there for just over 5 years now. I'm married to Alison. I've got two boys who are 20 and 17, and they are Tom and Harry. Nope.
There was a pause there.
They definitely are my children. And I just definitely forgot their name, one of their names, briefly.
It's telling which one you forgot.
I did nearly say the dog's name. I was thinking, I could say about dogs, but then you don't want a long introduction, do you?
That's all right. That's okay.
Too late.
Too late.
So.
That's 5 of our 10 minutes gone now. So today we're kind of talking about the subject of combustion versus hybrid. So the traditional combustion engine versus the future of electric hybrid engines, I guess. And what that means as we emerge into the new normal, which is a phrase that I think everyone is pretty sick of by now. But we're going to discuss about that. We're using the diocesan vision of Unlock as a bit of a template for the questions. So looking at lament, what have we lost during this pandemic time, but also looking at what we are giving thanks for, and also where are the missional opportunities to take the good news of Jesus into our communities. That has all changed because of what we've been through. So Craig, first question then. So looking back over the last 18 months, what would you say are the things that for you as a church leader, as someone in your community, are the things that you would lament? What are the things that you've kind of lost and have maybe even just changed over this time?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big losses early on was the sort of human connection with one another. I'm an extrovert, and I remember seeing a meme on social media that said, introverts, help your extrovert friends to work through lockdown because they don't know what this is. So that's not very meme friendly, is it? But it said something like that anyway. And that sort of really spoke to me because I thought that's the one thing that I'm going to miss is interaction and with other people. And I just feed off other people and are energized by it. So I found personally being in lockdown quite draining because I wasn't interacting with people. So I was on the phone a lot and on Zoom a lot, but even they were quite tiring, weren't they? I don't know whether you got Zoom fatigue at all, but that was awful. And then I suppose on a church-wide thing, I suppose that's an extension of that needing to interact with one another, missing that entirely, not being there on a week-by-week basis on Sundays. But also, for me, church is, it's about what we do when we worship together, when we gather together for worship on Sunday, but it's all the sort of soft relationships you have with people during the week, the sort of interaction you have one with another in home groups and small groups and whatever is going on in the life of the church. And suddenly to have those completely, everything cancelled was a real sadness and quite tricky. I found that quite tricky, and I know lots of other people did in our church. And everything changed, didn't it? I don't know how you responded to the needs in your particular context, but I guess like everybody else, the first question was, what's the right plug to plug into the camera to get the sound working? And all those new things that we had to learn. But then lament comes with also, I think the individual things that we lament also give thanks for. You know, some of the deaths that we'd already talked about just before this, we experienced some of those deaths in our own community. And the sadness of those, on one hand, was the fact that people couldn't gather together to mourn, to grieve with family and friends. But on the other hand, those moments of sharing those funerals with just a few people were really quite intimate and powerful worship experiences, both for me and for those who were gathered. And I know lots of family fed back. They said that actually they really appreciated having a small funeral and with not very many people. There wasn't the pressure to perform, there wasn't the pressure to have something afterwards. You know, it was very informal and intimate in that sense. So.
We actually had that with a couple of weddings, didn't we? Where people, they actually really enjoyed having a small wedding with a bit of live streaming maybe as an additional. But actually one couple just loved the fact that it was just them, their parents and kids, and you know, that was important to them, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it I think you kind of touched on it there, but it really makes the moment special. Particularly something like a wedding or a funeral where the event can kind of take over, can't it? You know, there's so much to organise, food for people, you know, entertainment if it's a wedding or whatever, a venue and so on, that the kind of preciousness, I don't know if that's a word, but you know, the sense of the event itself being really precious, whether it's a funeral, you know, and celebrating the end of somebody's life and mourning their loss, or whether it's in a wedding where you're celebrating the beginning of a new phase of a relationship and a new life that they're going to build together. That suddenly those things, there was much more space for them to be celebrated and rise to the surface, wasn't there?
Yeah, and I suppose the holiness of those moments, as you say, sometimes it gets taken over by the the party afterwards, or particularly for a wedding. I'm not thinking about a funeral. But the event, the day itself takes over. But then what's special about that is the fact that in a wedding is that God is bringing two people together, and you can really celebrate that. And you can live stream it to people all around the world. I think one wedding we did a wedding just after Christmas on the 27th. That live stream was our biggest view. Because they had so many friends and family all over the world. And not all of them would have been able to have been we wouldn't have been able to fit them in our church building, but by necessity of geography, they wouldn't, definitely not all have been able to be there, but they did fit. We got lots of really positive feedback. They all felt like they were part of the service, you know, they almost felt like they were present. So again, something to give thanks for and to carry forward for us as we think about the future.
So your context, Craig, is fairly rural in its setting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of rural / suburban. So we're sort of right on the edge of Lancaster, but at the moment still with a bit of a gap between the two.
At the moment,
the two things. Yeah.
But one thing I'm interested in as well is that there seems to be a real sense of community around Girlgate and Ellel. Seen things where, you know, when the floods happened and people pulled together a few years ago. So a lot of it is kind of relational, but did you find it easy coming out of lockdown to pick up those relationships, or was it a bit of a struggle to start things up again? How did you kind of find that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for us, our church community, whoever that is, whether it's the core people who come week by week, or the people that we have reached out to over the last few years, or those that were connecting in with us online, there's always been very much an attitude of we want to be, our go-to is to meet in person. And so whatever the restrictions will allow, our priority is to meet in person. And that's both a community thing, because we wanted to gather together as a community, but that's driven, I think, by a theology of what the church is. And for us, me particularly, and our church community, we talked a lot about and thought a lot about during the pandemic, what is our church for, and what is church. And for us, it was our primary go-to was the image of the body of Christ, and the parts, the members of the body need to be together in order to flourish and thrive. And so we took that as a sort of driver for how we wanted to be as church. So whenever we had sort of ease in the restrictions, we would would meet safely and following all the rules and regulations. I have to say that for the camera, don't I? No, but of course we did. But the priority was to meet in person, and so we didn't feel like we'd lost too much connection with people. There were some people who were too scared to come back, and some people who we hadn't really contacted and connected with on our live streaming services. So there was a little bit of sort of a small community of people for whom they'd become sort of disenfranchised, disconnected with us. But we worked hard to draw them back in and we have been still doing that over the last few weeks as we've been starting to meet again.
So in terms of this hybrid combustion engine picture, the hybrid being kind of the online presence, I know that you guys worked really hard on that side of things during lockdown as well. And now we're at a point where people are coming back in person. How does that fit together now as your experience, and what were the good things about the online and the negatives as well?
Yeah, sure. So we've now stopped. I don't know whether it's like heresy to say that we've stopped live streaming our services. Is that heresy? Is that okay to say that?
No, that's all right. It's not in the Bible, is it?
No, that's
Thou
true.
shalt live stream.
We'll live stream forever. Yeah, the 11th commandment. So we stopped because partly because it was practically driven, because we had basically one guy who was doing our live streaming. And he worked really hard on it to produce a good quality experience, so that we were driven by the idea of wanting people to feel like they were in the building. So we wanted the camera really close to the front, and we wanted the liturgy on the screen so that people didn't have to go and download a service sheet and they could just follow as they were watching. But it did require him to be in the building. In fact, he was at church more Sundays than I was. I'm happy to say, not for me, but not for him, he was there almost every Sunday, because as Q says to James Bond in that Bond film, someone needs to pull the trigger, someone needs to be there to push the button Sunday by Sunday, and that's the bind for him. And so one of the reasons we've stopped is to give him a break. He's got a young family, he needs some time to sort of just be in church without the responsibility of doing that. But also we wanted to send the message that we were now inviting people to come back into the building. It was safe to come back in the building, and that's where we would want you to be. And so we've pulled the plug on the live streaming for now. We can still offer, if you're watching and you want a wedding at St John's Ellel or a funeral, then we can still offer live streaming. But that's an offer that is there. The technology is there, and I think that's one of the great things about one thing to give thanks for is the fact that we'd already started to talk about the possibility of having a live stream option or a stronger digital presence, and it's brought those conversations forward for us. So we, now we can offer that to other people. It's meant that we've had to spend a little bit of money and buy some kit, but we've done it on cheap. So but it can still, what you can do with a little bit of kit is amazing. It's phenomenal.
So I guess it means that when you want to, Craig, you can just restart it again in the future.
Absolutely. All the kit's there. Yeah.
And actually, I guess during the pandemic, we had the same experience. We couldn't train anybody up during the pandemic. You couldn't sit two people close together to say, this is how to do this on my laptop. You couldn't do that when you're social distancing.
Yeah, that's one of our big issues is training, not being able to do that. Yeah.
But still having that skill set in the person that was doing it for you. And as a pandemic comes to an end, I guess in the future be able to have some training take place and then...
Sure, yeah. And actually we are talking about it at our PCC soon, so it may well be that by the time this goes out, we've actually decided that we want to continue live streaming, and I don't want to preempt the PCC's decision. But
I think it's really interesting though, Craig, as well. One of the things that just if I could, if I put my critical head on of looking at live streaming and live streaming our services, is that it could become quite easy, couldn't it, for our congregations to maybe think, oh, I don't need to go to church on Sunday. I'll just watch when I've got a bit of free time, and that I think that can be. There's much to gain in that, being able to engage with church in some way if you've got a busy life or whatever, but we also do lose that sense of being part of community, don't we? There's no opportunity to join in with the sacraments, taking communion and so on. There's less opportunity to serve. That's a real part of being kind of part of a Christian community, isn't it? And so, but it's easy. It's easy to just put your laptop on while you're still in your PJs and having your morning coffee and kind of do church. But I wonder if we're not careful in that, then we could accidentally be almost encouraging a bit of like the consumer Christian mentality, you know. And I think it's really brave, you know, to what you're saying of, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to just put church on for you in your home. We want you to come, not just because we don't want to, you know, have the hassle of doing the live stream, but actually we've thought about this theologically, and we think to be church, then we want to be together where possible and be together in the same building. That's a different thing, isn't it, to like say somebody who is housebound, who has, you know, for multiple reasons, you know, would find it difficult to come to church and therefore is perhaps excluded. That's a different discussion, isn't it, that maybe is worth having. But I think for your average person that is physically able to be in church, then it's a good challenge to bring to people, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's part of the maybe hope for the future as well. You know, to say we've removed everything about what church is about. We've stopped you from meeting during the pandemic. You can't meet in small groups. So you then begin to ask the question: well, who are we? What is our church all about? And so then you challenge, because a lot of what we do is physical, isn't it? Communion is a physical thing. Take something and eat something, and you can't do that digitally. I mean, maybe one of the things to give thanks for actually has been the ability to watch the church in our pajamas, you know. But we all know that you get easily distracted. You know, you can watch the cricket, or you know, watch songs of praise, but obviously on Sunday morning, while you're watching your own service back, and you engage with it at a different, probably more relaxed level than you would if you were there in person.
I mean, you can even mute the sermon if you.
Surely not.
This is quite quite revealing, isn't it?
Well, it is, absolutely.
Craig watches the cricket and you mute the sermon.
I didn't say I did.
Not when I'm watching my own service, obviously.
Yeah, obviously not.
Jim only mutes it when I'm preaching.
But Sundays became sort of a much more relaxed occasion because you were, you know, you must have had this as a parish priest.
Yeah.
You know, suddenly you're not up really early worrying about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it and making sure.
I kind of roll with it. So I was up till late Saturday night trying to upload the pre-record, you know, and getting that on YouTube and Facebook. And then Sunday morning, I've got feet up on the settee in the lounge at home, watching myself, and it was just a surreal experience. Really strange, but I guess one size doesn't fit all, doesn't it? Because I think in our context, at Christchurch Fulton, where I am, we found some elderly people who are housebound. And we said on a different episode that we all became housebound at one point, didn't we? When the government said don't go out for anything other than to go to a doctor's surgery or for food, I realised what it was like to be housebound. I remember one lady who just sadly died recently, Pat Fairhurst, and every Sunday she watched our live stream on Facebook and she left a comment with praying hands or with a nice little comment saying wonderful service. And I was so encouraged that she now, every Sunday, was able to watch our live stream. So we've chosen to keep the live stream going. But we know that tension you've mentioned is there because you don't want to encourage, like you say, consumerism, but you don't want to discourage those who can't access church becoming like they're isolated again. Sure. So I guess different contexts are different, aren't they? But I think it's brilliant to know that when you want to restart it, you can do. And that's the key thing. You've learnt that skill set. And there's some churches are still trying to learn that skill set, aren't they? Because it's so hard, isn't it? You know, you're just lucky you had that guy that could do it, I guess, weren't you?
Very fortunate and blessed.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well is that it doesn't have to be all live stream's not the only option, is it? You've got a social presence online as well.
And certainly having a strong social media presence before the pandemic, and our tech guide sort of pushed that with us and pushed us on in that. But having that was sort of a really good foundation for then people to be able to know where to find the button to press to follow church for Sunday morning, and then also, you know, engaging on a week by week basis. So that was always useful to have. That's something we'll carry on for sure in the future and probably engage with it more. So when I say we were not live streaming, probably what we will do is have some sort of short talk or short summary of what we did on Sunday as a soundbite thing. People always engage well with photos and videos from our church services, so it would be a crime to stop doing that, you know. So we'll carry on doing that aspect of digital stuff.
I'm interested to think, you know, were any of us thinking about live streaming before the pandemic? I wasn't. Were you thinking about doing?
We'd started the conversation,
That's good,
because
isn't
it was because we'd had that strong sort of digital presence. We thought, well, that's the sort of the next step.
That's really good that you had that foresight. Because I'm thinking it's probably, you know, sped up a process about 5 years. You know, maybe we'd have done it every Sunday 5 years from 18 months ago. Yeah. But it had to happen like that, didn't it?
In our last church, we ended up setting up live streaming because they were linked with a church in Kenya in Africa, and so that prompted the conversation of to be twins but not be able to see what each other are doing was part of the conversation. We also had, you know, families that were playing football and so couldn't make Sunday mornings. So was there the ability to just record even just the sermon and put that up as a separate thing? So that, we'd had that sort of conversation, and that was happening well before the pandemic. But it was a response to need, not we want to build our social media presence as such.
It's interesting though, isn't it, that those churches, like we've, you know, just said there, that when we're forward thinking and we're part of society, that you know, we're the church, but we are also members of society, aren't we? And society is largely online as well as in person now, and so that being reflected in our church gatherings is feels like it should be a natural thing, but it does take a little bit of foresight, doesn't it, and looking forwards. And I think that you know, of course we hope that the pandemic is well and truly behind us and we're not going to go into a new season of lockdowns or whatever, you know, we really hope and pray. And so in a way, we can't at this point say, right, well, what will we do to prepare for the next lockdowns or the next, because we're hopeful that's gone. But the world is still moving forwards, isn't it? And so there is a nudge maybe at this point to kind of think, okay, we've got through it. We've gained all these skills. We've got this equipment. We've grown, like you've said, Damian. We've maybe fast forwarded 5 years, but actually, we've probably caught up with the rest of the world quickly in 5 years, haven't we? And so, the challenge for us as church gatherings is, how do we keep moving with the development of technology and the opportunities of gathering in person, and how do we use technology to support that, promote it, shout about it, you know, tell the world what we're doing, how good it is, how great Jesus is, that we keep growing and developing in that so that we stay on the front foot and that we don't end up kind of going back to, oh, well, this is what we know, this is what feels comfortable and easy and just happens for us. But we're back on the back foot again, because more challenges are going to come in our world, aren't they? It may not be another pandemic, we hope, but there'll be new challenges for us to face, won't there?
It's a great point, because Zoom's always been there, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But we didn't discover it until the pandemic.
Who knew it was there?
Well,
Yeah.
We just finished doing our sort of like a vision and values thing in our church through our PCC and starting to share that with our church. And we couldn't find anywhere to fit this line in for our vision and values. But one of the final things we just put at the bottom was we want to be adaptable and agile as a church. And that was sort of in response to community need, thinking about the way that we'd responded to the floods a few years ago. But then also the opportunities, missional opportunities that arise in a village. We want to be able to adapt to meet those needs and also to communicate something of the gospel message through those. And little did we know how agile and adaptable we would have to be, and it's almost brought that right to the fore of our vision and values. It was almost became who we were as a community, trying to adapt to the changing situations and be agile enough to reach out to a community. So yeah, that was an interesting sort of feature for us going forward.
Have you thought, Craig, or anybody else thought about how we can do a sort of hybrid thing in terms of Zoom and midweek discipleship? Because we've got a discussion at Christchurch Front at the moment about how do we enable those who can't get to church to do, for example, a midweek house group or gathering. yet also encourage those who can come out to come out. And I'm starting to think, can we do a hybrid where we've got a screen in a room at church, we've got people in person engaging with somebody on screen, or do you just do a virtual midweek group and then an in-person midweek group? Have you got any thoughts on that, about how you might do that?
I think it would be tricky it certainly would be tricky for us to do a hybrid version with people on screen and in person on one evening. But I think there's still definitely a space for small group stuff on Zoom. I think for lots of our folk, they valued having the sort of the distance that Zoom creates, and also the comfort of being in the comfort of your own home, being in a safer space. So we've not planned anything yet, but I think there's certainly a space in our calendar and in our sort of suite of things that we offer to do something online for sure.
I think there's the ability to save time as well is part of it. So I'm finding outside of church in the secular world that a lot of events are asking for live streaming to go alongside the event that's happening in person, because what they're recognising is, are people willing to travel as far when they know that it's available to live stream? Now, there's a discussion about how in the business world do you monetize that and get their worth from it, so that people still feel like they want to come to your event. But that's definitely a discussion. I mean, I know from your uni kind of point of view, you had a bit of a hybrid thing. 4 years ago, you were doing sessions where sometimes you had somebody zooming in, sometimes you were commenting on Twitter with a certain hashtag and all sorts, weren't you?
Yeah, and that was a really great thing, because it opened up when there was a specialist, who wanted to speak about something, then more people have got access to it. It kind of broke down that thing of you've got to travel to London for, specialist events or whatever, which has been really great because it opens it up, doesn't it, to more people.
Yeah, I think where you have that sort of set piece thing, it's much easier to set it up. Where you're encouraging like maybe small group interaction, it becomes a bit clunky, doesn't it? I mean, it's clunky enough on Zoom without having some people in the room who want to speak, and you can read that easily. Whereas you perhaps don't pay as much attention to those who are on screen. But where you've got like a guest speaker or a special service, I think definitely a hybrid version would work in that
It's
context.
a tool then, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a tool for expanding or opening up to more people rather than the only option.
Yeah, and actually one of the things we're doing is sort of expanding our in-person things as well. So I think, and it's been in response to the feedback we've received online, with the fact that some people can't come on Sunday mornings because of dance things or sports things or whatever. And so we're at the moment talking about offering an evening service for people so that they've got another option to come to church on a Sunday if they want to. We already have an afternoon messy once a month as well for families. So just to extend our offer of in-person stuff because of what we've heard during the pandemic with those who have interacted with us online but perhaps have never been to us in person because they can't, because we're restricted to one service on Sunday. So
that's good, because it shows the priority of in-person, doesn't it? The message you said in there is, okay, we could just live stream a Sunday morning so you can watch it during the week or later in the day, but instead we're going to do an extra service so that you've got that choice. If you can't come on a Sunday morning, you could come on a Sunday afternoon or evening, which is great. Yeah, sure.
And part of that is so that it's that challenge of discipleship, that you can watch church in your pyjamas, going back to that, but actually that we think discipleship demands a little bit more of us, and that's something about service, about being in person, that thing about the body of Christ again. And so we will work hard to create those spaces for you to be part of that community. So
there are certain things that I've been challenged about. Using Zoom, for example, I have one lady midweek who works till late in the evening, often because of her nature of a pressurised job. And she's joined us in midweek Bible studies when she never could before the pandemic. So she has like an hour on Zoom from 8 till 9. And that's worked for her, because before she'd have to come at 7:30, go through excellent tea and coffee and fellowship, and then we'd come and sit down and have a pre-conversation, and then have the Bible study, and then have the conversation in the car park before you get in the car, and that would take 2 hours. Whereas now she can Zoom in for 1 hour and it works really well for her. So although she misses out on the fellowship in person, she's gaining from an hour of discipleship she wasn't getting before. That's challenged me to realise that there were certain traditions and routines that we'd created unknowingly about, we sit in a church hall or we have a cup of tea before we start and we have a prayer at the end and then we go. And that, for some people, became inaccessible. So I'm learning stuff all the time.
We found that actually one of the really surprising things for me that was really positive that came out of lockdown was morning prayer. So we did that on Zoom and it gathered a group of people who wouldn't ever really have done morning prayer, but we gathered, in the morning before work. So because it was on Zoom, it meant that similar scenario really, people could either be at work a little bit early and just log in and do the 20 minutes, or they could, do it while they were having their morning coffee or morning breakfast or whatever. And
still in bed, leave the camera off.
Yeah, we did have that, didn't we? People were doing that. It was good for me also because I'm not a morning person, and so it's quite helpful for me to just kind of leap out of bed, throw on a hoodie and be on Zoom, and nobody knows that you've not washed yet, unless you tell them.
On TV, well done.
But they knew at the time. I did confess. But that was a really lovely, surprising thing and a way of sharing life together actually that felt a little bit more honest and a bit more authentic. That we are actually we're here doing morning prayer together. We've not put on our best clothes to come to church. We're just coming as we are to pray at the start of the day when none of us really know what the day ahead is going to hold because this is an odd situation that we're in. And that was really, really precious time actually. Yeah, and we also did an Alpha course via Zoom, and I'd done Alpha courses, 2 or 3 years previous to that in that context, and we'd had maybe 1 or 2 people come, because it's quite intimidating walking into a building you don't know to people you don't know. But that was probably one of our most successful, in terms of numbers of people coming, one of our most successful Alpha courses that we've done, and it was useful to be able to put people in the same groups every week, and help people grow in relationships. So even though there was the sense of we're not in the same space, from a missional perspective, that opened up opportunities, and not just people who are housebound, but people who perhaps have got young children that are not able to come out of the home after bedtime, after their children's bedtime and so on, or busy at work and just able to kind of come home and open the laptop and you're there. That's been a real surprising, positive thing that I'll definitely hold on to, I think, in the future.
Great. Right, well, we are out of time, so we're just going to round up. I think what's really interesting, Craig, is focusing on that body of Christ. And I know when we first went into lockdown, one of the first times we actually saw people again was actually when we prayed you out. That's not the right thing, is it? When you were leaving,
it's finally gone.
When you were leaving St Thomas's in Lancaster to go full time with St John's, we opened up the live stream and had like a Zoom.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And it was the first time that I'd seen church family in maybe 2 months, was it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And it was really like a bit heart-wrenching to see it. I mean, there was a technical thing going on in the background that was exciting because it was something new for me to fiddle with, but it was really telling. And I think that just as we round up, I just want to kind of give you the opportunity, if you're watching or listening, just to have a think and a pause about as you think about church family, church body, and maybe you're someone that hasn't returned to church yet, who's a little bit scared of what that can bring. Maybe you're quite happy with sitting at home in your pajamas, but actually just to have a think and a pause now as we just come towards the end of the podcast, just to think about what are the things that you get strength from, what are the things that inspire you coming back together as the body of Christ. And also, where are the things that the church near you is maybe providing online, whether live stream or social media content that's really life-giving as well? Because I think what we're saying is there's a bit of life in both, isn't there? Well, there's definitely life in both. So yeah, just to have a pause and a think about where that sits for you. So I'm just going to pause and then we'll pray and then say goodbye. So yeah, let's just have a moment of silence. So Lord, we thank you for the ability to gather in person again after a time where we were told to stay at home and stay away from church. It's amazing to be able to come back together in some sort of capacity, however that is. And Lord, we thank you for the tool of digital ministry as well. We thank you for the tool that can be in our lives even if we're not in the building. And we just pray that as we think about where our own role is in the body of Christ, would you speak to us about how we fit, how we play our part in the body. Amen.
Amen.
Craig, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
That's all right. Thank you for being in the sunshine with you. So we'll be back next week. As we said at the start, if you've got any comments, anything to add to the conversation, do stick it in the comments section below, or you can email us on hopepodlancs@gmail.com. And we'll see you next week for another episode.